It's been a long time since we've done a knife review video for the channel, and so we thought we'd come out with a really exciting one for people today, based on two of probably the nicest fixed blade fighting knives that you could buy. On the right we have the Cold Steel Taipan in CPM 3V steel, and over here we've got the Spyderco Rock Salt in H1 steel. The Taipan is a double-sided dagger. The Spyderco Rock Salt is more based on a kukri design. The blade, the actual sharpened edge of the Taipan, is about 7 inches, and the overall length, it looks like, is just over 12 inches. Of course, you can get these measurements online to be precise. The Rock Salt, the blade, the actual sharpened edge, is about 5 inches, and the overall length of the knife is again about a foot long. Now, I'm not sure if you would really notice much difference in terms of blade length when it comes to the actual practical usage of it, because down here you're not really likely to strike with that first inch or so of the Taipan's blade. Most of your strikes would be up here on the top half of it. And when you put these side by side, they're almost identical in terms of reach. A little bit maybe more reach with the Taipan than the Spyderco Rock Salt, but it's fairly negligible. On the Spyderco Rock Salt, you have a little bit more durability given that the pommel is part of the full tang of the knife, so there's nothing that could ever, knock that pommel loose. But it is rounded off instead of sharpened here or coming to a point, which means the impact would be spread over a slightly larger area on this, and it's not likely to do quite as much damage on a pommel strike as what the Taipan could do. This pommel comes to a point which makes it even more dangerous on the strike because all of the force is concentrated on the very edge of that. And it is a stick tang that comes down through the handle here. On the Taipan, the pommel is very likely affixed to the tang, somehow maybe screwed in, I'm not exactly sure. The handle on the Taipan is perfectly straight, in which case you're relying on the grippy material here on a withdraw to make sure that this knife actually comes back with you. Now that said, the material that they put on here is sort of rubberized and checkered, and it does give you a lot of grip when you're holding on to this blade, but there is always the chance that your hand could slide off the back. I tend to prefer a knife that comes and flares out here at the bottom in some way as to retain your grip on the back as well. On the thrust, however, you do have a guard here, which is very important on any fighting knife to keep your hand from sliding up onto the blade on any type of a thrust. And as well, this guard protects some from other knife strikes. If a knife were to connect with your blade and slide down, you're going to have some protection on both sides of your hand from you getting your hand cut by another blade. So I really like the guard on the Taipan. It's sort of a traditional guard that you might find on a sword, and done very, very nicely. Nice grippy handle again, great pommel, but I just wish that they would have done a little bit of a flare for better hand retention on the back end of the Taipan. On the Spyderco Rock Salt, the handle really conforms well to your fingers. There's no way this would slide out of your hand either forward or back because of this really nicely pronounced guard, I guess we would call it. And on this side of the blade, it likely would provide you some protection against another blade coming down and hitting, very much like the Taipan. On this side of the blade, though, there's really nothing to catch the other blade. So that might have been an oversight that they could have put something protruding a little bit over there to actually catch a blade that you block with the back side of this knife. There's jimping here on the Spyderco Rock Salt if you wanted to put your thumb up there, but I don't really like grips with the thumb because then you have your thumb there when you're pushing force forward. I think it's better just to have a knife that you can grip more of like a standard fist. And you also have a spot here, a divot for your finger that can go in. So if you really wanted to choke up on the rock salt to do smaller tasks, say in the woods, this is a more practical knife to carry for survival / bushcraft type of work. You could actually manage quite well with this in the woods, where it is a drop point too, so you could even probably do firewood with this type of a knife. But they do have it ground down a little bit on the back here. If they wanted to make this a very purpose-built fighting knife, they could have sharpened that back side of the blade, and then you could do back cuts as well, similar to some Bowie knives, and that would have made this a really dangerous fighting knife. So I'm not sure what their thought was on that, but again, if I wanted to build this purpose-built for fighting knife, I would have had a little bit of a protruding guard out here on the blade to catch knives, and I would have sharpened the back here. If you want to have this more as an overall utility knife, which is I think what their design was, given that you can slide your hand up here and grip up for finer tasks, then I think they did the right thing by maybe not sharpening this. They just simply took a bit of the weight off the blade. The Taipan is noticeably heavier than the Spyderco Rock Salt. It may have to do with the type of steel that they used. I'm not really sure. Or it might have to do with the handle and the different amounts of material that the cold steel put into the handle here. The Taipan is balanced really, really nicely. Right about at where the guard is up here is where it balances. But it is, like I say, a noticeably heavier knife. Now, the benefit of that, however, is that on the slashing, it would probably make the Taipan perform well because the weight helps the knife to carry through when you're cutting something. The Spyderco is a lighter knife. It's balanced. I'll see if I can find it. Right about where the top of the handle is also, where the guard is where this balances. And because of the design of the kukri blade, it's already really good for cutting. These have a nice curved design this way, which allows the blade to really bite into whatever it cuts into, and it's got the nice belly on it. So kukris are known to be really good cutters to begin with, and so I don't think the weight is going to detract from that. Very likely the performance on both of these when it comes to cutting would be very similar. Ordinarily, a dagger would not cut as well as a kukri, but I'm going to say because of the additional weight to the Taipan, that very likely it does cut as well as the Spyderco Rock Salt. And then we'd have to get into thrusting when we go to do a little bit of a demonstration here. We'll go into the sheaths next. I like the Spyderco sheath a lot more than the Taipan sheath. They call this Securex with cold steel, but it's Kydex basically. They're both like a Kydex sheath that they come with. They both retain really well in the sheath, so when you slide that in, there's not really a lot of wiggle, and it comes out really smoothly out of the sheath. So great job on the Spyderco one. On the cold steel Taipan, it slides down and clicks in really securely. There's no wiggle sound there at all, but it's almost a little bit too secure for a fast draw. And I know I reviewed this knife once before and talked about this, the poor side of the sheath for this. But what really doesn't make sense on the Taipan sheath is that they didn't put a clip to go over your belt loop in here. What they've got is this floppy thing up here at the top. And if this were around your belt loop and you tried to draw this fast, it's not going to come out of there. What's going to happen is the entire sheath and knife are going to haul upwards on your belt, and you're going to get all snagged and hung up. So this was a really poor design. This should have had a clip down here to go over your waist or your belt that held it really securely in place, so that when you pulled up on this, it just slides straight out for you. But as it is, if you were to wear this on your belt and try to quickly draw it, it's just not going to draw out of the sheath at all. You have to get your thumb down here and apply a good bit of pressure to push down while you draw up in order to get the Taipan out. So as a fighting knife, that was a big oversight on the sheath here, and I think I would like to just garbage this strap thing on top and buy something that could secure down here for a clip, and then you would have a nice sheath with the Taipan. On the Spyderco, they did exactly what they should have. They put a belt loop clip here on the back, so that when you put that on your belt and you pull it to draw it, it's going to come straight out for you and very fast. The only downside to the clip here on the Spyderco sheath is that it's not large enough for wide belts. It's like they used a very thin standard belt for the clip. And I think when you're carrying any kind of weight, a knife like this size, you probably want to have, you know, a wider belt, in which case the clip now isn't really even all that usable. So big oversight there in a way too. I think they should have made that clip come down, you know, another half an inch basically, so that you could put that through a wide belt, and a wide belt carries weight better on your waist. So both sheaths have their downside, but I would say the Spyderco sheath is better than the Taipan by far. The Taipan has CPM 3V steel, which is a modern super steel, we'll say. It's extremely tough. It is a tool steel though, so I don't think it's totally corrosion resistant, but I've had this for a little while and I don't see any problems at all appearing with rust on it. And again, because the steels are modern steels, they're better than anything soldiers would have carried in the past in, say, World War I or II. Sometimes they were using really makeshift stuff in the trenches and in warfare. I would put either of these steels up against anything from the past, and I'm sure they'd perform better. Over here, though, the Spyderco Rock Salt has H1 steel. Probably not quite as tough. Well, it wouldn't be as tough, I'm sure, as the CPM 3V steel, but it's very corrosion resistant. It's a stainless steel, and you can use this around salt water, which makes this even a good boating knife. So overall, this Spyderco Rock Salt can be used for a lot of different applications, and it's really lightweight and handles really nicely. So if you want an all-around amazing knife, the Spyderco Rock Salt is a great blade. The Taipan is instead a very purpose-built fighting knife because of the dagger design. You're just not going to be able to use this for very many other applications other than, I would say, modern-day warfare if you wanted a backup knife, and if you're being supplied by a military where you don't have to actually worry about making firewood and doing like survival bushcraft type tasks. So if I were to carry one of these knives with me as a general purpose knife, clearly the Spyderco Rock Salt would be the better choice to be carrying around with you in the woods, let's say. So now let's go outside and do a little demonstration.
All right.
If I go to draw this, you'll see it'll actually hook on this little strap that runs around the waistband here of these pants and comes right out. So it draws really nicely, and that is the benefit I see to the Spyderco sheath over the Taipan. Okay, here's a look at the Taipan on my waist. Again, not exactly something you could conceal or carry around that way, but it is light enough, both of these knives, that you can carry them if you were, you know, in the military or whatnot. Now, the drawback again of this sheath for quick drawing, number one, you have to undo that snap or you have to leave it open. You can probably leave that open because the retention is so good down here on the sheath, but then it tends to want to move away from your waist a little bit and it could snag on things. So that's the first issue, is you got to undo that. And then next, if I go to just haul up on this, look what happens. And so this is no good at all, the way they design that. And the only way to overcome it is you'd have to apply the force down with your thumb as you draw upwards. And I could see in an adrenaline-fueled situation that would not happen, and so really poor design on the sheath cold steel. Okay, so aside from the poor draw of the Taipan, when handling this blade on all of the normal cuts that you would do, slashes this way, horizontally, and your thrust, and your thrust. Everything feels good on this type of a blade. The only thing is, though, the angle that this type of a blade leaves your hand is sort of at a right angle like this. And when you go to thrust straight forward, you have to kind of bend your wrist down in order to thrust forward. But other than for that, that actually this design helps though more on these types of angles when you're cutting in this way or thrusting in this way. Having that right angle actually helps that blade to connect better, and it's fine on, again, all of the slashes. You'll connect just fine with this. Knife feels really good in hand, it's balanced really nicely, it handles really well, and the weight of it I think really helps with the cutting potential of this here blade. I would say it's very fast and just a great feeling knife in the hand as a fighting knife. Now I'll get that one from you. Put that away. Okay, now the Spyderco rock salt. Again, the handle feels awesome in the hand, same as the Taipan, probably better. On the cutting, it feels great where it's a kukri. It cuts really well. The thrusting on this type of a blade is actually better compared to a dagger because of the bend in a kukri. It lines up really well with your wrist without you having to bend your wrist very far. And so on a straight thrust, this knife works out really, really well. However, on the cuts that you come in at an angle like this, these types of thrusts, this one you could probably get away with. On this type of a thrust, you may not even connect with the point. So there's a bit of an issue there with how you use this in its application. If you were to slash and thrust up this way, you may not be able to even connect in order to come back down with that type of a thrust. So the kukri has a little bit of a drawback on the traditional movements that you do in knife fighting. But it's really just, it seems that back thrust like this type of a thrust, you can get your angle, your right angle well enough that it will connect. And on the straight thrust, it's even better than the dagger. So all in all, hard to say. They're both awesome knives. They both handle really nicely. I would say if I wanted an all-around really nice knife, I would go with the Spyderco Rock Salt. Corrosion resistant, useful for bushcraft, survival, boating, any type of application pretty much. If you can find one of these, I think they are discontinued and have been for some time, so good luck trying to find one. But if you're lucky enough, Spyderco Rock Salt is a really, really awesome knife. The Taipan, very purpose-built for, I would say, modern militaries, where you don't have to worry about making your own, firewood or anything like that, where all you're worried about is going into a trench and maybe having to use this as a backup weapon. This would be really awesome. You can buy these still on the market, and highly recommended as a fighting knife.
Make sure to comment. We'll probably get back to you. Bye.
Cheers.